Here's today's devotional. This week's series is Spiritual Dryness. Today is day 1 of 7, when faith feels distant. So the hardest part is that nothing obvious actually went wrong. There are seasons when faith doesn't appear. It simply feels further away than it used to. You still believe, you still care, you still want that connection, but something feels different. It feels less immediate, less alive, less familiar. Maybe you notice it while you're driving home. The same songs play, the same prayers form in your mind, yet something feels muted, not absent, just harder to reach. You wonder whether anything changed, whether you're drifting, whether you've somehow become less responsive than before. One part of you says everything is fine. Another part quietly asks, why does it feel so different now? That question becomes surprisingly heavy, because when faith once felt natural, distance can feel like failure. Yet spiritual dryness often arrives without warning. Not because you've stopped caring, and not because God has stopped caring, but because eventually faith moves beyond moments that feel easy. There's 2 parts of scripture I want to read from. First one's in Psalms, second one's in Hebrews. And Psalms 13, verse 1 reads, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" It gives language to an experience many people try to hide. The passage sits inside a place of honest longing, not certainty and not emotional strength, just longing. It acknowledges what is felt like or feels like when awareness of God's presence seems less immediate than before. The discomfort isn't ignored, it's brought into the conversation. The passage reminds us that spiritual distance is not a new experience. People have been wrestling with this for generations, and many of them remain faithful while walking through it. And the second scripture is Hebrews 11, verse 1. And it reads, "Now faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen." It shifts attention away from emotional confirmation. The passage points towards trust that continues even when outcomes remain unseen. Faith is not presented as constant emotional assurance. It's presented as confidence that remains active despite uncertainty. The perspective matters during the season because sometimes faith feels strongest when emotions agree. And sometimes faith becomes deepest when they don't. The difficult reality is that distance often reveals what we've been depending on. If faith depends entirely on feeling close, then every dry season becomes a crisis. But if faith can continue when feelings fluctuate, something steadier begins to develop underneath. Not dramatic certainty, not constant inspiration, just steadiness. The kind that survives changing conditions, the kind that remains present even when enthusiasm fades. Dry seasons rarely feel productive while you're inside them. Most people don't look back and say, "That was one of my favorite seasons." Yet many eventually realize something important happens there. The relationship becomes less dependent on emotion, less dependent on immediate reassurance, and more rooted in trust. If faith feels distant today, you don't need to manufacture stronger emotions. You don't need to pretend like everything feels fine. You don't need to force certainty. You can simply just remain present. Just keep showing up, keep praying, keep listening, keep taking the next faithful step. Even if it feels quiet, sometimes the distance you're experiencing is not the end of the connection. It's the place where deeper trust quietly begins to grow. Hope this one helps.